Chapter 15. Which pointed her finger and a mass of black fog rushed over. Within the fog, one could faintly make out many sinister and pained faces. This was the witch's trump card. It was called Ghost Mist, and it gathered dense energy and resentment. She usually hid it in an urn of ashes and buried it in the ground to absorb energy. She would only use it at crucial moments. Moreover, this ghost fog had no intelligence, only resentment. It was extremely difficult to control and could backfire at any moment. Today, seeing Li Qingshan's ferocious attack, she had hurriedly activated it. However, the power of this ghost fog was also extraordinary. Ordinary beings would immediately fall unconscious after being enveloped by this ghost fog. Most sinister of all was that this ghost fog was like ghosts that existed between reality and illusion. Ordinary people couldn't see it at all. If not for the fact that Li Qingshan had already opened his eyes, he would have fallen for it. The effects of these days of bitter cultivation began to show. His body tilted to the side, avoiding the ghost fog and charging straight at which hadn't expected Li Qingshan to be able to see the ghost fog. She immediately panicked and quickly shook a copper bell. Little An, come out for Grandma and kill him." The child called Little An was squatting in the corner, his face full of pain. However, he was holding his head motionlessly. In a flash, Li Qingshan used Demon Ox Stomps the Ground. His foot heavily stomped on the ground, leaving behind a deep footprint. He flew up and slashed down with his saber. There was a flash of cold light and a splatter of blood. Witch's hand that was as thin as a chicken's claw was chopped off along with her wrist by Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan didn't have time to examine the results of his saber strike before he felt Yin Qi attack him from behind. The ghost fog smelled the scent of a living person and was like a beast that had smelled blood. Driven by resentment, it pounced forward. Li Qingshan didn't dare to stop and rushed forward. However, he felt that the ghost fog didn't chase after him. Instead, he heard a mournful scream behind him. Turning around, he saw that the ghost fog had enveloped Witch and the ghost faces were biting and gnawing at her body. Even Li Qingshan hadn't expected this turn of events. It turned out that Witch had lost control of the ghost fog under the intense pain and immediately suffered a backlash. Every injustice had its perpetrator, and every debt had its debtor. In the end, the witch, the instigator of all this, reaped what she sowed. Her entire body twisted as her flesh withered at a visible rate. Li Qingshan was delighted as he watched on. He laughed aloud. Originally, there was a trace of pity and sympathy in his heart, but he suppressed it forcefully because he felt that it was shameful. In the face of the innocent and suffering children, he was willing to sing a long song and shed a tear. Towards such a person who was worse than a beast, he had to erase all of his sympathy and laugh heartily towards the sky. The outer wall of the house was originally filled with people looking into the house. When the villagers became curious, the three ruffians couldn't stop them at all. They could only let them do as they pleased and occupied the best viewing seats at the front door. Seeing Li Qingshan step through the door, he flew up and chopped off Witch's hand. Then Witch fell to the ground and howled in pain. As she howled in pain, Li Qingshan's laughter was like that of a madman, frightening everyone. Many people were so frightened that they fell off the wall. The three ruffians also fell to the ground with weak legs. Thinking back to how they had mocked and cursed him in the past, they felt incomparable regret. Such a person wasn't someone they could afford to provoke. Li Qingshan saw the ghost fog gradually dissipate. Once the resentment within was released, it stopped. Witch was lying on the ground, on her last breath. She hadn't died yet, but it was clear that she wasn't far from death. He guessed that she must have cultivated some kind of cultivation method to be able to hold on. Witch stretched out her remaining chicken claw towards the child in the corner. She seemed to be pleading and resentful as she called out, "Little An, Little An." Little An looked at her in a daze and fear. Li Qingshan said, "I'll send you on your way." The thick steel knife in his hand stabbed downwards. Steward Lu and village chief Li rushed over when they heard the news. They didn't even have the time to shout something like, "Spare her life," before Witch died. They looked at each other and broke out in a cold sweat. They remembered that which had said arrogantly a few days ago that Li Qingshan didn't have long to live. Today, she had lost her life. They were even more thankful that they didn't force Li Qingshan that day. Otherwise, who knew what the result would be? This was Li Qingshan's second time killing someone. Compared to the first time when he was panicking in the dark, this time in broad daylight, he was very calm. He had improved so much that even he was a little surprised. He thought to himself, could it be that the ox demon's fist of great strength has aroused the demonic nature in my heart? Or is this my true nature? In the modern society of his previous life, many people couldn't express their true nature. They could only go with the flow and live according to the times. Not to mention adults in their 30s or 40s, even youths had lost their passion and ambition. He was just one of the many people, no different from a normal person. But after going through the cycle of life and death, it actually aroused the heroic spirit in his chest. He didn't want to live a mediocre life anymore. But he was suppressed by the hard life in this small mountain village for 15 years. Finally, he had this opportunity. Once his heroic spirit was released, he really was like a crazy demon and refused to restrain himself. Li Qingshan stopped smiling and turned his head to say, "Don't panic, you too. This old woman asked for it. She deserves it. I still need you to uphold justice. You broke into a house and killed someone in broad daylight, and you still want us to uphold justice?" These words only swirled in the hearts of the two. Naturally, no one dared to say it out loud. Suddenly, one day, he rushed out of the crowd and came in front of Li Qingshan. He kowtowed 3 times and raised his head. "I killed her. It has nothing to do with Erlang. This old witch destroyed my family. Xiao Mao, father has avenged you." After he finished speaking, he cried and laughed. It was Li Fugui. This big stone that had been pressing on his chest for many years was suddenly lifted. He felt that even if he died, he could die in peace. No one in the village knew what happened to Li Fugui. They couldn't help but be silent. Only Steward Lu showed an embarrassed and fearful expression. It was because Li Fugui encountered this accident that he used alcohol to drown his sorrows and sold his family's fertile farmland. That was how he was able to achieve the illustrious name of Half-Village Lu. If Li Qingshan suspected him of colluding with the witch, then wouldn't it be terrible? Li Qingshan said, "I will take responsibility for my own actions. I don't need you to take the blame. Please come with me." He called the 3 ruffians and a few prestigious elders in the village to come to the witch's backyard. Li Qingshan turned his head and nodded to the eaves. The others followed his gaze, but there was nothing. Little and was hiding in the shadows, pointing to an empty space. Under Li Qingshan's order, the 3 ruffians began to dig the ground. Under Li Qingshan's gaze, they did their best and didn't dare to be lazy. In a short while, they had dug a big hole and dug out a skeleton. Li Qingshan went down to collect the skeleton. He looked back at the eaves and ordered, "Continue to dig." This wasn't Little Anne's skeleton. Under Little Anne's guidance, Li Qingshan had the people dig in a few more places. A few more skeletons were dug out. The surrounding people were shocked. How could there be so many skeletons buried in the witch's backyard? And every one of them seemed to be the skeleton of a child. Li Qingshan was also shocked. His expression became more and more serious. He knew that these were the victims of the witch's witchcraft. The ghost fog full of resentment he saw must have come from this place. He only hated that the old hag had died so quickly. At this time, there was a ding sound as if they had touched something. They carefully opened it and found a tightly sealed porcelain jar. Without waiting for Li Qingshan to stop them, the 3 ruffians rushed to open the jar. A small cloud of black gas rushed out. As if afraid of sunlight, it went straight into the mouth and nose of one of the ruffians. Chapter 16. The other 2 ruffians were so scared that their faces turned deathly pale. They were unable to move, but the contents of the porcelain jar blinded their eyes. The porcelain jar was filled with sparkling silver. They had never seen so much money in their entire lives. Even Steward Lu and the few old men who were on the verge of death revealed expressions of eagerness. Li Qingshan pushed them away. They were about to fly into a rage. No matter how timid they were, for the sake of wealth, their hearts would beat faster and they would become fierce. However, when they saw that it was Li Qingshan, they didn't dare to make a move. Li Qingshan didn't care about what they were thinking. He took out the porcelain jar and put it to the side. Under the jar, a small skeleton appeared. The flesh and blood on the skeleton had long been stripped away, revealing a grayish-white color. It was unknown how long it had been buried. Little and finally nodded. Li Qingshan sighed softly. He looked around and poured out all the silver in the jar, placing the white skeleton inside. The silver ingots rolled to the ground and formed a small hill. At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on it. They didn't even care about the skeleton anymore. Steward Lu was someone who had seen the world. He estimated that there were at least a few hundred taels of silver. Even he would be jealous, let alone the others. In a small mountain village like this, it was really a huge sum of money. Li Qingshan didn't expect that which had collected so much silver over the years. As the saying goes, wealth moves people's hearts. He wasn't an immortal who didn't eat the food of mortals. He was also tempted by this wealth. After all, he would need money for many things in the future. In terms of eating meat, he didn't want to always rely on oxen. Since oxen wanted him, he would show it. He also wanted to change his diet. Perhaps he could go to the market and buy a few jars of good wine. However, he also understood the principle of people die for wealth and birds die for food. If he took all the silver away, these people would be afraid of his power and wouldn't dare to say anything. However, they would definitely resent him and bury a lot of seeds of disaster. Even the death of which might not be able to appease them. Village Chief Li, you are the most respected person in this village. What should we do with the silver? Tell me. Li Qingshan wiped the blood off his thick steel knife and sheathed it. It seemed that he wanted Village Chief Li to make the decision, but he emphasized the words, highly respected. Not at all. This is all thanks to Erlang. You killed a big scourge in the village. This silver should be handled by you. Village Chief Li had played a disgraceful role a few days ago. He felt that Li Qingshan's words were full of threats. He didn't dare to respond. Li Qingshan looked around. The people he looked at all nodded in a hurry. Erlang, you deal with them. Erlang, you handle it. Just now, he nodded slowly. He didn't mind sharing some silver in exchange for peace. However, if anyone really wanted to take charge of his spoils of war, they would have to ask the knife in his hand first. This group of people was much older than Li Qingshan, but they had to listen to the arrangements of a 15-year-old boy. However, no one felt dissatisfied. The current Li Qingshan was no longer the Li Qingshan of the past. The ruthlessness and decisiveness of drawing his knife and killing people had already shocked them. Li Qingshan sat on the ground and distributed the silver. He pressed one hand on the porcelain jar with the white bones and the other on the knife. A group of adults and old people lowered their heads and listened to him. However, the first person to get the silver surprised everyone. Uncle Fugue, the witch destroyed your family. You should have some compensation. Take the silver. In the future, don't drink and drown people. Only then can you comfort the dead. Li Qingshan used the scabbard to poke at the edge of the small mountain of silver and took out some silver. How can this be good? Li Fugue didn't expect Li Qingshan to say this. He was at a loss. Take it. Li Qingshan was thanking and praising him for coming forward bravely just now and taking on the responsibility of killing people. Li Fugue gratefully accepted the silver. Li Qingshan called out to the two ruffians. These are for you. He glanced at the dead ruffian on the ground. Go back and give him a proper burial. In the future, make a good living. Don't do dirty things like stealing chickens and dogs. Otherwise, I'm afraid there will be a disaster like this. The two scoundrels were both surprised and overjoyed. They stowed the silver away. When Li Qingshan mentioned their companion, they had both paled slightly, but they did not seem sad at all. Only the heavens knew whether they would specially spend money to bury their companion. Finally, Li Qingshan cupped his fists to Steward Lu, Village Chief Li, and a group of old people in the village. A few days ago, I offended you. This silver is my apology. I hope you can forgive me for not being sensible. However, if there is anyone who doesn't respect the old and bullies the weak. Although he said this, there was no sign of apology on his face. As he spoke, his tone became even more stern. We won't. These people said repeatedly. Li Qingshan nodded and took out a pile of silver for them to distribute. What about the other people in the village? Village chief Li got his share of the silver and looked at the pile of silver that was left. Since Li Fugue, the victim, could get a share of the compensation, then there were many more victims in the village. It could be said that every family had given an offering to the witch. Li Qingshan glanced at him. Does anyone have any objections? Although he sympathized with the villagers who had been deceived, he didn't plan to pay for their stupidity. If he hadn't killed the witch quickly, these people might have been intimidated by the witch to deal with him. Moreover, it was absolutely unfair to divide the money. In the end, not only would he not get any benefits, but he would also become the target of everyone's resentment. Village Chief Li also saw through this, so he came to trip up the youngster who was in the limelight. To put it bluntly, the interests of the villagers had nothing to do with him. Instead, it was the person in front of him who was increasingly threatening his authority in the village. Maybe in a few years, when he really grew up, he wouldn't even be able to keep his position as village chief. However, he didn't expect Li Qingshan to be so meticulous at such a young age. The glance that seemed to see through his thoughts made him even more frightened, and he didn't dare to say anything more. Li Qingshan wrapped up the remaining silver and said, "Then please go and explain to the villagers. If anyone dares to spread rumors and spread it to my ears." The group of people nodded. With the sword and knife in front of them, they had all received benefits, so who would dare to spread rumors? With village chief Li leading the way, he came to the door and explained to the villagers, greatly praising Li Qingshan's demeanor of eliminating evil for the people. Originally, there were still some loyal followers of the witch who were not convinced. However, when the skeletons were carried out one by one, everyone's mouths were shut up. How could a person who had so many skeletons buried in the backyard be a good person? Moreover, who would be willing to offend a strong and ruthless person like Li Qingshan, as well as a group of virtuous and respectable old people for a dead person? Li Qingshan didn't show himself. Instead, he picked up the copper bell in the witch's hand and could faintly feel its spirituality that was different from ordinary utensils. He asked Little Anne, "Is this what she used to control you?" Little Anne nodded and looked at the copper bell nervously. Chapter 17. Little Anne's expression was both happy and confused. Li Qingshan searched through the witch's room again. Little Anne followed behind him like a shadow. Suddenly, he extended his little hand and tugged at his trousers, pointing at a place. Li Qingshan found a secret compartment in the wall. There was a stack of paper inside, all of which were silver notes. He had vaguely heard that this world also had banks, but this was the first time he had seen actual silver notes. Presumably, the witch had buried the silver when she was in her prime. Later on, she grew old and frail, unable to dig anymore. That was why she had exchanged all her loot for light silver notes, storing them in this secret compartment. There were roughly a few hundred taels of silver. She was so rich, yet she had fallen out with him over a pig's head, resulting in her death in the end. And at the very bottom of the secret compartment, Li Qingshan finally found what he was looking for. It was a page of book paper, covered in tiny characters. At a glance, it was a technique for refining souls and controlling ghosts. The edges of the paper were uneven, as if it had been torn out of a book. Li Qingshan practiced the ox demon's fist of great strength and had gained a rudimentary understanding of the path of cultivation, so he was curious about other techniques as well. He never thought the witch's strange technique would only come from a single page of the book. If she had possessed the entire book, he probably would have died here today. However, if the witch had an entire book, she probably would not have holed up in Crouching Ox Village for half her life. The witch was not originally from Crouching Ox Village. She had suddenly settled here several decades ago, and no one knew her origins. Even Li Qingshan had no idea where she had obtained this page of book paper. However, there was a silver note under this page of book paper. It was actually a huge sum of 1,000 taels of silver. This silver note was extremely yellowed, and it was obvious that it had been around for a long time. It was definitely not something she had earned after coming to Crouching Ox Village. The witch's origins became even more mysterious. Li Qingshan asked Little N, "Do you recognize this?" He felt that perhaps it had something to do with Little N's origins. Little N was speechless, neither nodding nor shaking his head. Li Qingshan knew that this was beyond what he could answer. He obviously accepted everything in the secret compartment without hesitation. Just as he was about to walk out the door, he felt Little N tugging at his trousers. Li Qingshan looked back and saw him staring at him in confusion, like a lost child. He was indescribably pitiful. His heart softened, and he crouched down. He asked gently, "Don't you have anywhere to go?" Little N nodded. Li Qingshan said, "Then accompany me for now." He opened the jar, knowing that Little N did not dare to walk under the sun. Little N smiled shyly and flew into the jar. Li Qingshan returned to the thatched hut with the jar and buried it behind the thatched hut, creating a small grave. The green ox returned and asked, "Did you succeed?" "She's just an old witch. How hard can it be to deal with?" Then he showed him the spoils of this trip and showed the page of the book to the green ox. He asked, "Is this also a divine ability? Can I practice it?" This remnant piece of paper is naturally nothing, but this piece of paper came from a supernatural power called the Dark Een Ghost Control Art. I don't know how it fell into her hands, but cultivating this kind of incomplete thing probably won't bring her any benefits. Haven't you heard of biting off more than you can chew? You should practice the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers first. Oxen glanced at him and revealed the origin of the page. Then, which is stronger, the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers or this Dark Een Ghost Control technique? If it's the original strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers, then it's hard to say. Although the Dark Een Ghost Control technique does not focus on self-cultivation, it can gather a large group of ghosts and bully the weak. It's a supernatural power that is good at fighting. If you can't defeat the user in one move, it's easy to get drowned in the sea of ghosts. Then what about the strength of ox and tiger that I practice? Of course it's better. Li Qingshan calmed his mind and no longer hesitated. He put the page away. The other spoils of war were the money. Originally, Li Qingshan thought the black ox would not care about these mundane objects, but he never expected the black ox to say solemnly as soon as he heard that, "All right. Compared to that piece of paper, this is what matters." Disdain for a supernatural power, but attach great importance to money. Even though Li Qingshan had experienced Oxen's education about eating meat and drinking wine, he couldn't help but be surprised. This brother ox was really worldly. Oxen saw through his thoughts. Haven't you heard of the words wealth, companionship, law, and land? These are all necessary conditions for cultivation. Wealth is still the first. Li Qingshan nodded. No matter what I do, I need a financial foundation. If Oxen didn't provide him with food, he wouldn't be able to practice even if he had the secret manual. But I don't think I need to spend too much money. 8,000 taels of silver was a huge sum. If he only used it to buy food and wine, it would be enough to support him for a long time. Oxen said, "You keep asking me how long it will take me to master the ox demon's fist of great strength." Yes, but you won't tell me. I can tell you now. With your current cultivation speed, if there are no accidents, it will probably take you 10 years to master the first layer of the ox demon's fist of great strength and achieve the strength of a bull. 10 years. Li Qingshan's mouth opened wide in shock. And this is the shortest calculation. If you meet a bottleneck, it'll be even harder to say. The stronger the supernatural power, the harder it is to practice. Do you really think Daoist supernatural power is a country bumpkin? Do you think you can master it easily and become invincible? Wake up. As if a bucket of cold water had been poured on Li Qingshan's head, the joy he felt from killing which was swept away. Then, if I want to completely master the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers, I'll need at least 110 years? He couldn't imagine what he would be like after 110 years. Wrong. The higher the level, the harder it is to practice. It's not surprising if you can't master it in 300 to 500 years. But you don't have to worry too much. Every time you master a layer, your body will strengthen and your lifespan will naturally increase. Then what should I do? Li Qingshan believed that he had extraordinary willpower and persevered in practicing every day. But if he had to persevere for a few hundred years, he would go crazy just thinking about it. Oxen saw that the blow was almost over and made a "brat, now you know how powerful you are" expression. If you want to shorten this time, the easiest way is to rely on the word wealth. Ignoring Li Qingshan's strange expression, a list flew into Li Qingshan's hands. There were dozens of medicinal herbs listed on the list. It's used to make soup and wine. This is a trick that even mortals know. It doesn't matter if there are more or less medicinal herbs in it. The key is that one of them is indispensable. Ginseng. Li Qingshan already saw the medicinal herb at the top of the list. This was probably the most common and easily found spiritual medicine in the world. It was known as the king of herbs and could greatly replenish one's vitality. In Chinese medicine, there was a kind of soul return soup. When a person was about to die, they could recover some of their spirit and make a will. In reality, it was ginseng soup. Chapter 18. Then I don't seem to be any different from an ordinary martial artist? Of course there's a difference. An ordinary person's physique is weak and can't absorb any nourishment. Eating too much ginseng is not only not beneficial, but harmful. I didn't tell you in the beginning because your body is still weak, so it's useless to tell you. These days, you've been slowly recuperating, and you've cultivated a trace of essence qi. Now you've reached the requirement. I was planning to ask you to find a way to raise money. Now you can save some trouble, but I'm afraid the money won't last long. Li Qingshan also understood where the difference was. He could eat more ginseng than an ordinary person, and he didn't have to worry about a nosebleed. His body was like a cauldron, and with the help of divine arts, he could refine and absorb all the essence qi that entered his body, without any waste. This also meant that Li Qingshan had to buy a lot of ginseng, and ginseng was an expensive medicine no matter what era it was. But he had to eat ginseng like a carrot, so no matter how much money he had, it wouldn't be enough. How much ginseng could he buy with the 1,000 taels of silver he had? He couldn't help but ponder this question. After lamenting, Li Qingshan could not help but admit that this was not bad news. The rate at which his strength grew would reach a whole new level. In order to pursue a breakthrough in strength, ordinary people would have to search for rare elixirs, and even if they took them, there might not be any effect. But he only needed to eat the most common and easy-to-get things, and his strength would continue to improve. God knows how many people would be envious of him, so why would he be dissatisfied? As for real money, there would always be a way. With enough strength, why would he be afraid of not having money? This little devil is a bit interesting. Oxen turned behind Li Qingshan, and its round eyes stared at Little End, who was hiding behind Li Qingshan. From the beginning to the end, Little End had been hiding behind Li Qingshan, and he quietly and curiously looked at Oxen. Little End was so scared that he hid to the other side, not daring to face this talking bull. Although Oxen didn't have any murderous or baleful aura, he instinctively didn't want to get close to him. You mean Little End? He has nowhere to go now, so I'll look after him for a while. You don't mind, right? Li Qingshan said it casually. If Oxen minded, they would not have said it in front of Little End. With only that piece of paper, she actually refined a ghost slave, and it is a ghost slave that can drive things. It is really incredible. Either the old woman is a genius in ghost refining, or the little ghost's spiritual quality is somewhat special. However, seeing that the old woman had been refining for so many years and sacrificed so many test subjects, but she had only refined such a ghost slave, it must be the latter. Li Qingshan looked at Little Anne. What was so special about him? However, a little ghost was a very strange thing in itself. Oxen said, maybe he is your best trophy. Why don't you take him as a ghost slave? This child may be of great use to you in the future. What ghost slave? He is just a child and I have promised him to give him freedom. Even in the most difficult time, Li Qingshan was unwilling to go against his heart and sell Oxen for travel expenses. Of course, he was even more unwilling to do so now. Oxen felt that he had said too much and yawned, "That's up to you, but it has lost its master. If no one feeds it, it will not take long for its aura to dissipate, and its soul will fly away and disappear." Soul will fly away and disappear. Little and blinked his eyes in confusion. Ghosts are not poultry and livestock. Do they need to be fed? The dead can't be allowed to live in the world of the living. Even the extremely powerful ghosts can't resist the sunshine, and even a gust of wind can kill them. If no one died and all the ghosts were left in time, it is unknown how many ghosts have been accumulated in the world for thousands of years. What should I do? At dusk, Xianxia strode through the mountains and forests with an axe on his shoulder, and a little ghost that seemed to be real wandered around him. Sometimes it ran far to the stream and looked at a fish curiously. Sometimes it flew to the treetops and touched a bird. But without waiting for Xianxia to call, it returned to him like the wind and looked at him eagerly. Xianxia shook his head and smiled back. For this child, he had a faint sense of responsibility in his heart. But behind them, the bird fell stiffly from the treetops, and the fish floated on the water with its belly turned white, which proved that this was not just an ordinary child, but a dangerous ghost. Xianxia searched carefully in the forest, and finally stood in front of a big locust tree that needed more than 10 people to encircle, and waved the axe to chop it. Although he didn't know the axe method or the knife method, the ox demon's vigorous fist contained the most basic and most mysterious method of using force. He could use any weapon freely. Every chop of the axe was powerful and heavy in the same place. Wood chips flew and the huge tree fell. Xianxia didn't care about anything else. He only cut out a small piece of the wood core in the center and brought it to Little and reached out to touch the small piece of wood core, and his little face showed a comfortable expression. In the end, he simply turned into a gust of wind and went into it. Xianxia smiled. This was according to the method taught by oxen. He found an ancient locust tree that was more than 100 years old. The locust tree had the natural effect of gathering spirits, which was very beneficial to spirits. Now that he tried it, it was indeed true. In this way, he didn't have to worry about Little An's soul dispersing. Back to the hut, he sat on the big stone in front of the door and carved the wood core into the shape of a wooden plate. After careful polishing, he carved the word "an" and wore it on his waist. The yang qi in his body would slowly nourish Little An's soul. He could also use the yin qi in Little and to practice controlling the qi in his body. In the small courtyard, Xianxia sat on the ground and kept shouting, "Little and neck." Little and hugged his neck. Under the stimulation of yin qi, the genuine qi in Xianxia's body was mobilized and flowed to his neck. Right arm. Little and quickly changed his direction and hugged his arm. Although his handsome little face was still pale, it was full of a childish and innocent smile, as if it was a very fun game. Until the moon rose, Xianxia just now got up, and Little and reluctantly retreated. With the help of Little and, the genuine qi in Xianxia's body was tamed a lot, and Little An's eyes were a little more lively, not as dull as they were at first. Xianxia thought about it. This was probably not just due to the nourishment of yang qi. No matter how clever a child was, if they were taken away from their parents and watched over, abused, or beaten as they pleased, they would probably become so dull. And when he regained his freedom and life slightly returned to normal, the spiritual qi in his heart began to sprout. Little and looked at Xianxia expectantly. Although he still couldn't speak, his eyes clearly said, "Play again." Well, this is not a game. That's all for today. We'll talk about it tomorrow night. Little and nodded obediently. He would never act like a spoiled child, but he couldn't hide his disappointment. Xianxia couldn't do anything about it. All right, let's play again. Little and smiled shyly, but immediately pricked up his ears. Chapter 19. Time passed quickly, and autumn arrived in the blink of an eye. The maple leaves in the mountains gradually reddened, and the golden ears of rice became plump bit by bit. An ox cart passed through a small path in the field slowly. The oxen that pulled the cart had no one to drive it. The ox cart was covered in thick beast hides, and a young man lay on it. He chewed on some straw, resting his head on his arms leisurely as he gazed at the sky. A dagger was tied to one side of his waist, and a wooden tablet hung from the other. He was Li Qingshan. He had over 1,000 taels of silver on him, and he wanted to go to Cypress Stream Town that was over 5 kilometers away. In a remote mountain village, spending money was not an easy matter. If he wanted to buy things, he could only go to a larger town. Qingyang City was abundant in resources, but it was too far away, and it definitely would not be cheap. As a result, he could only settle for the next best thing and go to the town. At a fixed time every month, there would be a large gathering in the town. At that time, the people from the nearby villages would all go to the town to conduct various transactions. It was the best time to buy ginseng, and he had accumulated quite a lot of beast hides, so he could use this opportunity to sell them. Originally, Li Qingshan did not want oxen to pull the cart anymore, but oxen did not mind being a regular ox at all. When he arrived at Cypress Stream Town, the sky had just brightened. The town was bustling with horses and carriages as people moved to and fro. Many small peddlers called out their goods loudly. It was a bustling sight. Li Qingshan found an empty space and laid out the beast hides on the prepared sackcloth. However, he did not call out like others. Instead, he sat to one side and meditated. He did not miss any opportunity to cultivate. In his body, the weak stream of qi had already grown a little stronger. He was like a playful child, constantly driving the stream of true qi to flow all over his body. Although he did not move his body, doing this was extremely taxing on his mind. Li Qingshan would open his eyes from time to time and respond to the customers who came to ask about the price. He had a huge sum of money on him, and he did not want to become rich through these beast hides. He only wanted to sell them as soon as possible so that he could buy more ginseng. As a result, he set the price extremely low. Although he refused to bargain with anyone, his business was extremely good. It was almost winter. Li Qingshan had experienced the pain of the bone-chilling wind. All regular people wanted to make a pair of leather boots or a leather jacket. Before long, a large group of people had gathered around his stall. "Move! Out of the way!" A few young men with bows and arrows on their backs and hunting knives separated the crowd with unfriendly expressions. They surrounded the stall and cast their shadows on Li Qingshan's body, casting Li Qingshan's shadow. Li Qingshan opened his eyes and asked, "What can I do for you?" His eyesight was no longer the same as before. He could tell at a glance that these people were not easy to deal with. Although they weren't very old and didn't have a particularly fierce expression on their faces, they had a sharp murderous aura around them. If patch-haired Lu was a barking mangy dog, then they were ferocious mountain guard dogs. Any one of them could easily kill patch-haired Lu. A short and vigorous young man with a short beard questioned, "Where did you get these beast skins?" His companions stretched out their hands to play with the beast skins and discovered that it was just as the rumors said. There were no arrow holes or any signs of damage on these beast skins. They were all rare high-quality hides, but they were sold at a much lower price than normal beast skins. If you want to buy, then buy. If not, then leave. Don't block the sun. Li Qingshan was too lazy to make up a lie to explain to strangers. He closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. The surrounding people had already spread out in a circle, but they did not leave. Instead, more and more people gathered. All kinds of discussions could be clearly heard. Aren't these the hunters from Drawn Rains Village? How dare they look down on the people from Drawn Rains Village? How many lives do they have? Drawn Rains Village. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. Even with his lack of knowledge, he had heard about this place like thunder. This was one of the villages around Cypress Stream Town, located extremely deep into the Myriad Mountains. The people who lived in the village were all hunters who hunted for a living, so it was no wonder that they gave off such a bearing. Compared to a farming village like Crouching Ox Village, the people of the Drawn Rains Village were much fiercer. They fought against wild beasts in the mountains every day and practiced a few martial arts that had been passed down through generations. Not only did they refuse to obey the rules of Qingyang City, but they never paid taxes either. There had once been people in Qingyang City who had attempted to send troops to conquer this place, But before they had even reached the village, they had run into countless traps and hidden arrows. By the time they reached the village after so much difficulty, they had already lost half of their men. The army's morale was low, so the leading general could only draw the reins in front of the village and flee back to Qingyang City in disgrace. As a result, the original name of the village was forgotten, becoming the Drawn Reins Village. It was possible to imagine just how proud the people of a village that could force an army to return in defeat would be. If a teenager wanted to contend against them, it would undoubtedly be like throwing an egg against a rock. The short young man said furiously, "You can't sell these beast hides here." But Li Qingshan opened his eyes, and a gleam of light seemed to flash through them. It made the young man think of the vicious beasts in the mountains. His eyes glowed in the darkness, and he raised his guard instinctively. However, he was not afraid. They were hunters who fought against wild beasts. Moreover, when he saw how Li Qingshan was dressed as a farmer, he looked down on him even more. "Because I won't let you sell them." He extended his hand to flip Li Qingshan's stall. A large, coarse hand grabbed the young man's hand like a metal lock. It actually caused him some pain. The young man was surprised. What great strength this guy has. However, his reactions were not slow at all. He threw his left fist directly at Li Qingshan's face. However, his companions showed no intentions of helping out at all. They only watched on coldly from one side. They seemed extremely confident, and some of them even smiled scornfully. Speaking of which, this was the first time Li Qingshan had truly fought with someone. Patch-haired Lu had no strength to fight back in his drunken state, and which had suffered a backlash from the ghost mist. The fist tore through the air, not giving anyone time to think at all. However, this was the effect of many days of cultivation. Li Qingshan subconsciously tilted his head to avoid it. His right foot stepped on the ground, and his body leaned forward. With his spine as the center, all the muscles in his body trembled, and as one, an Iron Mountain Lean smashed towards the young man with great force. Iron Mountain Lean was an extremely common move in fist techniques. Demon Ox's Fist of Great Strength also had it, and it combined 3 of the moves at the same time. Demon Ox stomps on the ground. It stood firmly on its heels and exerted force from the ground. Demon Ox activates its hide. It had a tough body and could not be activated. Demon Ox butts its horns. It used its body as a horn to smash forward. All of its movements were done in one go. Oxen lay in the back and nodded in satisfaction. However, the young man turned pale with fright. It was as if a charging bull had charged at him. He felt a pain in his chest and was sent flying. He fell into the crowd, and all the muscles and bones in his body felt like they were about to fall apart. The discussions in the surrounding crowd stopped abruptly. The young man's companions were also stunned for a moment, and then they attacked in anger. Li Qingshan's expression became more and more serious. One-on-one and one-on-many were 2 completely different things. Unless the difference in strength was too great, it would be difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. If a strong bull was surrounded by a pack of vicious hunting dogs, it would only end up with pieces of flesh torn off and dying. Chapter 20. This was probably not just the power of that sliver of Xianxia, but also the miraculous effect of Oxen's tears. He ducked and dodged a punch. Ox demon butts its horns. His fist struck out and knocked down another young hunter. But at the same time, a hunter had already circled behind him and punched fiercely at Li Qingshan's back. The other 2 young hunters grabbed Li Qingshan's waist, one on the left and one on the right, and slammed him to the ground. They spent their days hunting in the mountains and were well versed in encirclement techniques. They were definitely not boorish men who fought on the streets. Even though Li Qingshan could defeat any one of them, he was instantly at a disadvantage. Seeing that it was too late to block, Li Qingshan focused all of his mental thoughts on his back. That sliver of Xianxia flowed with his heart. The muscles on his back twisted together, and a small bulge could be faintly seen. A heavy punch landed on Li Qingshan's back, but it was like hitting tough leather. All of the power dissipated as that bulge of muscle flattened. Other than a tremble from Li Qingshan's body, there was nothing else out of the ordinary. At the same time, The two hunters who had grabbed Li Qingshan's waist felt as if Li Qingshan's body was rooted to the ground. They could not move him at all. The three of them had used up all of their strength, and their momentum immediately weakened. Li Qingshan, who had suffered 3 heavy blows, had already recovered his breath. With a roar, his elbows dropped down. The ox demon butts its horns in ox demon's fist of great strength emphasized that, other than the fists and feet, the entire body could be used as horns. Elbows were the most powerful horns. The two hunters felt a sharp pain in their backs. They wanted to vomit blood and lay on the ground involuntarily. Li Qingshan suddenly turned around and pounced at the hunter who had ambushed him from behind. He punched him in the chest and knocked him to the ground. The surrounding people were dazzled by what they saw. They only saw that the young man, who was at a disadvantage, beat the 5 men of the Drawn Reins village to the ground in just a few moves. They were all astonished. Li Qingshan looked at the 5 hunters who were groaning in pain on the ground, and then looked at his own hands. It was as if he could not believe that he had done this. His strength had unknowingly reached this level. But before he could rejoice, a large group of hunters suddenly rushed out with their hunting bows and knives drawn. They surrounded Li Qingshan with fierce eyes. For this gathering in Cypress Creek Town, the Drawn Reins village did not just send a few people. There were more than 20 of them, and they brought the entire village's accumulated fur goods. Just now, those few young hunters were just juniors who had followed their elders to see the world. Seeing that they couldn't sell their goods, and hearing that someone was selling animal hides for cheap, they all rushed over together to find trouble with Li Qingshan. However, he didn't expect that Li Qingshan would be taught a lesson instead of looking for trouble. Naturally, the elders would not sit idly by and do nothing. They quickly reacted and surrounded Li Qingshan. The dozen or so hunting bows were drawn, and the aura that exploded in an instant made him feel like a trapped beast that had fallen into a trap. His life and death were in the hands of others, and he actually felt a sense of despair. Compared to this, the feast at Hong Men, at Steward Lu's house was like playing house. His mind was also as tense as a bowstring. He suddenly recognized the other party's identity. They were hunters for a living. Their expertise was not in their fists, but in the hunting bows in their hands. His ox demon forges its hide could block fists, but it definitely could not block sharp bows and arrows. At this critical juncture, he calmly pulled out the thick steel knife at his waist. His eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for a way to escape. He didn't expect that selling animal hides would also cause such a disaster. Although he was unwilling, he might have to kill someone in the middle of the town and carve out a path of blood. "Did you do this?" A strong man with a sickly face and a large bow on his back stood in the middle of the hunters and asked in a loud voice. Li Qingshan replied, "I did it." The man studied Li Qingshan in some surprise. If regular people saw this, their limbs would become weak from fright, yet this kid was so young, yet he was so calm. Just his mental fortitude was far greater than all the juniors in the village. He asked the short hunter that Li Qingshan had sent flying with the Iron Mountain Lean, "Xiao Hei, what's going on?" "Hunting chief, this kid has probably ruined our business." Xiao Hei struggled to his feet. The crowd fell into an uproar. "Isn't the hunting chief of the Drawn Reins village?" "It's Huang Binggu." The so-called hunting chief was equivalent to the village head, but it was different from Crouching Ox Village, where old people held power. Those who could become hunting chief in the Drawn Reins village were all the strongest men in the village. They were in charge of all matters related to hunting in the village. As for Huang Binggu, he was the current hunting chief of the Drawn Reins village. He was a renowned figure, and Li Qingshan had heard of him a long time ago as well. However, he had never thought it would be the sickly man before him. He finally understood the origins of the name Sickly Tiger. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. Li Qingshan obviously felt a heavy pressure inside, but he was no longer the Li Qingshan of the past. He sneered, "You came to ruin my business without saying anything, and now you're slandering me, saying that I've ruined your business." The Drawn Reins village really is tyrannical. Huang Binggu's face sank. He yelled, "Why don't you get up? You can't even defeat a single person in a group, yet you still have the face to lie on the ground and cry out in pain." Are you still worthy of being men of the Drawn Reins village? Li Qingshan knew he had not gone easy on them, but under Huang Bingu's order, the 5 young hunters actually managed to stand up by themselves. Apart from their sturdy bodies, they felt great reverence towards Huang Bingu. Huang Bingu raised his hand, and all the hunters put away their sabers and bows. We were in the wrong in this matter, but brat, you shouldn't have been so heavy-handed. If I hadn't been heavy-handed, the one lying here right now would be mine. It's rare for us to go down the mountain to sell furs. The daily necessities of the entire village depend on it. It's fine if you sell according to the market price, but this method of selling is messing up the market price, greatly harming us. Li Qingshan was silent. This was something he had not expected at the start. Naturally, he could say that it was his business how he sold it, but with Huang Bingu's reputation he had admitted that he was in the wrong in front of everyone, and had spoken with reason and evidence. He had not used his numbers to oppress him, so he was not willing to argue and pester him endlessly. If the other party really wanted to kill him, he would not just sit and wait for death. Huang Bingu said, "I'll buy all of these furs." A hunter came forward to pay the money and put away all the furs. The people in the surroundings all clicked their tongues in praise of Huang Bingu's loyalty. Li Qingshan was rather surprised. He glanced at the bag of money handed to him. "There's no need." He turned around and tidied up the ox cart. He did not rely on these furs to make a living in the first place. The other party was so generous, so if he haggled over every ounce, he would instead be looked down upon. The admiration in Huang Bingu's eyes deepened. He watched as Li Qingshan disappeared into the crowd and said to the people around him, "I like this kid. Does anyone know his origins?" A farmer said carefully, "He seems to be Li Erlang of the Crouching Ox village." Many people in the surroundings had actually heard of him before. They all said, "No wonder." Chapter 21. Li Qingshan went to the best restaurant in town and bought a dozen jars of good wine to fill the ox cart. He then followed the list given by Oxen and went to the medicine shop to buy most of the medicinal ingredients. However, the most important ginseng could not be bought from the medicine shop. In the largest inn of Cypress Creek town, a group of people wearing bamboo hats and carrying medicine baskets on their backs were silently drinking tea. Even in the inn, they refused to take off the bamboo hats and medicine baskets on their backs. From time to time, the shopkeepers of the big medicine shops would come to the inn and open the baskets to see what was inside. They would then hide their hands in their sleeves and bargain with them. If they succeeded, they would take away a bag of ginseng of different sizes. They were ginseng foragers from Ginseng King Village. Like Drawn Reins Village, they were both located deep in the mountains. However, they made a living by gathering mountain ginseng. If one wanted to buy ginseng, they would naturally buy it for the lowest price. Li Qingshan stopped the ox cart in front of the inn and looked around. He strode to a corner and said to the ginseng foragers, "I want to buy ginseng." The ginseng foragers saw that he was young and his clothes were shabby. They all looked at him with disdain, and no one responded. Li Qingshan frowned and took out the remaining 1,000 taels of silver in his pocket and placed it on the table. "I want to buy ginseng." This time, all the ginseng foragers raised their heads in shock. They did not expect Li Qingshan to take out so much silver. They looked at each other and finally, someone said, "How much do you want to buy?" Li Qingshan had already understood the price of ginseng. In the end, they agreed on a price and left with a large bag of ginseng. The ginseng foragers whispered, "Should we get rid of this brat? It's more important to find the spiritual ginseng. That's a treasure worth tens of thousands of taels of gold. Even mortals can prolong their lives if they eat it. If martial artists eat it, they can immediately become first-rate experts. They can even break through the obstacles and reach the innate stage. Although the spiritual ginseng is good, there's only one. We still have to deal with that sickly man from Drawn Reins Village. I don't think I have the luck to get it. A bird in the hand is better than 100 in the forest. Those who are willing to do this, follow me." 7 or 8 people stood up, grabbed the sabers at their waists, and left. Not far away from the door, a person was hiding behind a pillar. When he saw this scene, he quietly left. Li Qingshan drove the ox cart forward alone on the mountain path, chatting with oxen from time to time. Little and also poked his head out from the locust tree, sitting on the beam of the cart and listening to their conversation. When they reached a narrow valley, Oxen suddenly stopped and turned around to look at Xianxia. "Here comes your trouble." As soon as he finished speaking, 7 or 8 figures appeared on both sides of the valley. With his eyesight, Xianxia asked, "You are people from the Ginseng King village?" The group of people had knives in their hands. It was obvious that they wanted to kill and rob. "I've still underestimated the viciousness of the human heart." He could only sigh in his heart. It wasn't that he didn't understand the principle of not flaunting one's wealth, which was why he immediately drove the ox cart back to the village after buying the ginseng. He didn't want to stay for another night. However, he didn't expect that this group of people would be so daring to kill him in broad daylight. It was rumored that these people who climbed the cliffs every day to gather spiritual herbs and ginseng were extremely valiant. Moreover, they were all skilled in martial arts. Their bodies were as light as birds and as agile as monkeys. "Kid, we have some things to discuss with you," the leader said calmly. His eyes revealed a hint of disdain, as if he was looking at cattle and sheep in a cage waiting to be slaughtered. "Leave everything behind and you can go." This kind of calmness wasn't fake. They traveled in the mountains all year round. When they met lone travelers, they would kill them and take their belongings. It was a common thing for them to do. After the deed was done, they naturally wouldn't let anyone live. The ginseng foragers laughed and surrounded them. Seeing danger approaching, Xianxia suddenly shook the reins. Oxen glanced at him and cooperated, speeding the ox cart forward, refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. The ginseng foragers cursed and hurriedly dodged to the sides. 2 flashes of knives flew out from their hands and slashed at Xianxia, who was on the cart. Oxen swung its head, and its remaining horn drew a strange arc in the air. The leader of the ginseng foragers saw the horn coming at him, but he couldn't dodge it. The horn pierced through his stomach and nailed him to the cliff wall. The ginseng forager's eyes were still wide open, and blood gushed out of his mouth. He couldn't believe that with his martial arts skills, he would die to a cow's horn. At the same time, Xianxia somersaulted and landed on the ground. He dodged the 2 flashes of knives and held the thick steel knife in his hand. Oxen pulled out the horn and thought to himself, "From an ox's perspective, I've done better than I should. The rest is up to you." The ginseng foragers cried out in surprise, "Brother Gung." This Brother Gung was the best among them, but they didn't expect him to die in such a strange way. They couldn't have imagined that Oxen was a monster. Then he fiercely said to Xianxia, "Brat, do you know what you've done? I originally wanted to give you a quick death, but in a while, we'll cut off your flesh piece by piece and feed it to the wolves." Xianxia sneered, "With just you guys?" His expression was extremely solemn as he slowly pulled out his knife. He didn't expect to encounter 2 battles in one day, and each one was more dangerous than the one before. Sure enough, having martial arts skills also meant that it was easy to get into trouble. If he was just a weak peasant boy, he obviously wouldn't be able to fight against the people from Drawn Rain's village, and he definitely wouldn't have that much money to buy ginseng. This was the most dangerous battle he'd ever encountered in his life. Even though he had supernatural powers, he didn't dare to say that he could walk on flat ground. Oxen's words rang in his ears. His thoughts flashed, and the battle was about to begin. A strong gust of wind blew, and the 4 waist knives formed a net that enveloped Xianxia. The bull demon forges its hide would definitely not be able to block such a blade. Xianxia quickly made a decision. Without even looking behind him, he strode forward and pounced on the 3 ginseng foragers in front of him. His mind wasn't completely focused on the battle to the death. Instead, he kept thinking about the corner of Oxen just now. Oxen definitely wouldn't help him fend off the enemy. Otherwise, with its strength, it would be a piece of cake to kill these ginseng foragers. There was a deep meaning behind that corner. At the juncture of life and death, his comprehension and spirituality were all forced out. His eyes suddenly lit up. The bull demon, but its horns required every part of its body to be a horn, and the weapon was just an extension of the body. The straight, thick steel knife in his hand suddenly seemed to have a mind of its own, and it went around a waste knife that was blocking. With a pew-pew sound, a ginseng forager's neck sprayed out a mist of blood, and he fell to the ground on his back. Experienced. This kid knows martial arts. A series of shouts rang out, and the ginseng foragers looked at Li Qingshan. Their expressions were no longer as casual as they were just now. Li Qingshan's arms also had 2 new wounds. Thanks to the toughness of the bull demon forges its hide, they hadn't been cut open. Instead, the ferocity in his heart was aroused, and his eyes burned with fire. A group of people was hiding in the dense forest on the side of the valley. They were only about 100 feet away, and it was broad daylight. No one in the valley noticed them. Only oxen glanced in his direction. Chapter 22. At this moment, Li Qingshan's steel knife had taken another person's life. Although he had also been stabbed in the back, the cut was not deep and the wound had shrunk, so not much blood had flowed out. At the same time, a knife stabbed into his lower abdomen. He gripped the knife tightly and raised his hand, chopping off a terrified head. His ferocious aura was intimidating. Xiao He had not been convinced at first. He had thought that Li Qingshan had won by launching a sneak attack, so he had been looking for an opportunity to get back at them. At this moment, his forehead was covered in cold sweat. Li Qingshan's knife technique was exquisite, and his killing intent was so fierce that it shocked him. This wild beast was not something a half-baked hunter like him could kill. He was glad that they were just now in the middle of the city, so he had not drawn his knife against Li Qingshan. In a short while, 7 people were lying on the ground. Li Qingshan knelt on one knee with the help of his broken steel knife. There were more than 10 wounds on his body, and his clothes were soaked in blood. Some belonged to others, and some belonged to himself. There was only one ginseng forager left, and his face was filled with fear and madness. Even though he had committed many murders and robberies, he had always bullied the kind. He had never seen such a brutal battle in his life. "You lunatic!" Li Qingshan's expression was like a hard rock. In the face of life and death, every move he made exceeded his usual level and stimulated the potential in his body. However, this was also very exhausting. In a short while, he was completely exhausted. "So this is the path I have chosen? It's really full of blood." Oxen stood leisurely at the side as if asking, "Do you regret it?" "I'll kill you." The ginseng forager roared and rushed forward. He had no strength left in his body. The knife landed on his neck, and the chill made his hair stand on end. Li Qingshan roared, "I don't regret it." The qi in his body flowed into his hand. He gripped the steel knife tightly and swung it to meet the attack. Twang! Swoosh! The bowstring tore through the air, and a feathered arrow shot out, nailing the last ginseng forager to the ground. Li Qingshan raised his head in shock. A few vigorous figures slid down from the cliff. They were the hunters of Drawn Rain's village. They carefully approached Li Qingshan and suddenly grabbed his limbs. However, in that instant, Li Qingshan had exhausted all his strength and was carried to the top of the valley by them. "Brat, you've done well." Huang Bingu put away his bow, praised, and did not say anything else. With a wave of his hand, the hunters once again hid themselves on both sides of the valley. Not long after, the other ginseng foragers rushed over and checked their companion's corpse with grave expressions. When they saw the ginseng forager who had been nailed to the ground, their expressions suddenly changed, and they shouted, "Retreat! Release!" With Huang Bingu's order, arrows rained down from both sides of the valley. The ginseng foragers suddenly waved their blades, but unless their martial arts skills were far inferior, there was no way they could block the arrows. Cries of pain rang out. Meanwhile, Huang Bingu held his bow and stood on a protruding boulder, specifically aiming at the ginseng foragers who were trying to escape. Every arrow would hit its target, and not a single arrow missed its target. He was like a god of death. Li Qingshan propped himself up and watched. He also felt astonished. On one hand, he was astonished at how easily the battle between the 2 large villages had ended, and on the other hand, he was astonished at the power of the bow and arrows. He cultivated the ox demon's fist of great strength, and the thing that increased the fastest was his strength. If he could use a bow, wouldn't he be able to kill people like this? When Huang Bingu shot his fifth arrow, the cries of pain had already stopped. Only weak moans could be heard. Huang Bingu, a ginseng forager whose thigh had been shot, let out a shrill cry. That's me. Huang Bingu leaped off the cliff and asked, "Where's the spiritual ginseng? If you tell me, I'll give you a quick death." How do you know? I know a thing or two about the matters around the 100,000 Great Mountains. The spiritual ginseng has appeared in the mountains near Drawn Rains village. Consuming it can cure all diseases and prolong one's life, right? I originally thought it was fake, but looking at your expression, I'm starting to believe it. You want to snatch food from the tiger's mouth? Aren't you overestimating your own abilities? You want to use the spiritual ginseng to cure your illness, but that's just wishful thinking. You have no idea how to capture the spiritual ginseng. Just you wait, Ginseng King Village will not let this matter rest. You want to contend against Drawn Rains village with that broken village of yours that is in a state of disunity? Once this news spreads, who knows how many experts will gather at Drawn Rains village. Huang Bingu's expression changed slightly. Are you willing to do that? Seeing that he could not get any more information out of them, he waved his hand, and the hunters all stepped forward to finish off the surviving ginseng foragers. Then, they searched for their belongings, lifted them up, and threw them into the valley. In the blink of an eye, all the corpses on the ground had been cleaned up. Only traces of blood remained, showing how desperate the battle had been just now. When the next mountain rain fell, there would be nothing left. At certain times, a human's life was truly as insignificant as an ant's. The hunters' gazes once again turned towards Xianxia. Their gazes were filled with admiration and praise, but there was also an undisguised killing intent. Xianxia had heard a great secret. The people of Drawn Rains village would definitely not let him leave. The simplest method was naturally to kill him with a single slash and throw him into the valley along with the ginseng foragers. Unfortunately, Oxen was not willing to help him, leaving him to wander between life and death. Coming out of the mountains this time, he understood that his strength was no longer what it used to be, but he also realized how weak he was now. Perhaps this was Oxen's goal. Huang Bingu said, "Little brother, are you willing to come with me to Drawn Rains village?" What if I say I'm not willing? You don't know how to appreciate favors. Kill him. The hunters were enraged. Huang Bingu waved his hand and said, "I don't kill innocent people. If you are not willing, then leave. I believe that you are not a blabbermouth person." Xianxia was not that uncooperative. Based on the other's ambitious and ruthless demeanor, he would not be soft-hearted when it came to killing people. Perhaps he would not kill, but the hunters under him were all brimming with killing intent. Furthermore, he had the intention of going to Drawn Rains village to take a look. Perhaps he could learn some hunting and archery techniques. That way, he would be able to survive without the help of oxen. Furthermore, his own strength would increase greatly. As for the spiritual ginseng, he did not dare to think too much about it. In that case, I shall accept your invitation. Just now, Huang Bingu revealed a smile. He ordered someone to bring some ointment and applied it on Xianxia. However, he discovered that the wounds on his body had shrunk and were no longer bleeding. He clicked his tongue in wonder. Xianxia endured the pain and went to the ox cart. He took out the newly bought ginseng and put it in his mouth to slowly chew. Then he opened the clay seal of the wine jar and gulped down the wine. The wine washed away the ginseng, and a wave of heat spread through his stomach. Immediately, he felt much more spirited, which astonished everyone even more. Xianxia climbed onto the ox cart and no longer paid attention to the others. He closed his eyes and began to meditate. Recovering from the fatigue and pain on his body was secondary. He wanted to take this opportunity to sum up the gains and losses of this battle. First of all, he could no longer rely on luck. He had heard people say that the martial world was dangerous, but today he had personally experienced it. One careless step could cost him his life. In this world, human life was really too cheap. It was impossible to always have someone to help him, and it was also impossible to rely on exploding on the spot. To be brave but not astute was to seek one's own death. This great life had to be cherished. Chapter 23. As the heat spread through his body, the sliver of qi became active as well. It flowed through his wounds and gave him a slightly itchy feeling. Huang Binggu released a few agile hunters as scouts. The group of people hurried into the depths of the mountains around the ox cart. They walked all the way until the sky darkened. They entered a large mountain, and there was no sign of human activity in the surroundings. At the foot of the mountain, Li Qingshan saw the legendary Drawn Reins village. Tall wooden walls surrounded the village, and there were watchtowers in the four corners. It did not seem like a village, but more like a military camp. He approached it and passed on the message. Just now, the gate opened. It was not as casual as it had been in Crouching Ox Village. As the only outsider, Li Qingshan attracted everyone's attention. He did not show it on the surface, but he became nervous inside. This was the legendary dragon's den that could make an army rein in their horses. Although Huang Binggu did not seem to have any ill intentions, he still needed to deal with him carefully, just in case he lost his life carelessly. The thick steel blade had already been taken away. Even if it was still there, it had been damaged to the point where it could no longer be used after the battle. Huang Binggu arranged for him to stay in an empty courtyard. Although he did not send anyone to watch over him, he told him not to wander around. Afterwards, he left in a hurry. In the pavilion at the very center of the village, the most prestigious hunters of the Drawn Reins village were currently discussing around a round table under the illumination of a few lanterns. For the sake of gathering ginseng, the Ginseng King village has had grievances with us for a very long time. People from the village often die mysteriously in the mountains, so it's probably their doing. They even set their sights on the spiritual ginseng this time, so it's a perfect opportunity to give them a stab in the back. The two villages were only a few mountains away from each other. There was no clear boundary between them. The ginseng foragers made a living by gathering ginseng, while the hunters spent most of their time in the mountains, so they could still recognize ginseng. They obviously would not let it go if they came across it. As a result, many disputes arose. The disputes between the villagers would often be settled with knives. Because they were far enough apart, large-scale fights had never happened. Until a while ago, on the Bailao Peak, which was closer to the Drawn Reins village, between the two villages, they once again met on a narrow path. They discovered a legendary spirit ginseng that already had the shape of a human and could even leave the ground and walk. Such a rare treasure caused another massacre. After the massacre, the spiritual ginseng had already disappeared without a trace, but it should still be on Bailao Peak. The men from the two villages did not dare to act blindly without thinking. They searched the mountain on a large scale, but they were also making preparations. Hunting chief, this matter must not be leaked out. It's better to deal with that brat. That brat's skills aren't bad, and his temper is also to my liking. It would be a pity to kill him. I want him to stay in the village and contribute to the village. But he is still an outsider. There's no need to say any more. I will examine him carefully. If he doesn't have the qualifications, I will definitely not be lenient. Huang Binggu said resolutely. Then he coughed. In the pitch-black hut, Little and crawled out from the locust wood tablet and looked at Li Qingshan with concern. He reached out his hand and touched the scabs on his body. Li Qingshan said, "Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm fine for now." Although he could tell that Huang Binggu appreciated him, the feeling of having his life in someone else's hands was really uncomfortable. And if he wanted to control his fate in his own hands, he could only become stronger. He immediately followed Oxen's instructions and used the ginseng wine to soak the medicinal wine. Just now, he stopped and looked at his results, feeling a wave of joy and gratification. The next morning, Li Qingshan woke up early to practice Ox Demon's Fist of Great Strength. Suddenly, he felt a gust of wind behind him, as if a fierce tiger was pouncing at him. Li Qingshan turned around and punched, but it landed on empty air. Huang Binggu brushed past his arm, his right hand forming a claw and grabbing at his throat. He wants to kill me to silence me? A thought flashed through Li Qingshan's mind. Instead of dodging, he met the attack head-on, as if he was delivering his vitals into someone else's hands. At the same time, he drew his arms together like an old bear hugging a tree, exerting all the strength in his body. He cultivated in strength remarkable abilities, not mortal martial arts. Even though he had not cultivated the strength of an ox, the strength of a single hug was not something that flesh and blood could withstand. Huang Binggu suddenly retracted his claw, shrinking his body and circling behind him. "Not good," Li Qingshan said. Just as he was about to adjust his body, he felt that Huang Binggu had stopped attacking and was only looking at him approvingly. If he had retreated from that claw attack just now, the full power of that attack would have easily torn his throat apart. But instead of retreating, he advanced, restraining the power of that move. At the same time, he used a move that put his life on the line. Not only was he able to adapt to the situation, he was also quite courageous. "I've lost." Li Qingshan touched his neck. There were 5 bloody marks on it. Huang Binggu's skills were quite impressive. Even if he was not injured, he was definitely not his match. "Where did you learn your martial arts?" Huang Binggu asked. Other than being courageous and adaptable, Li Qingshan's martial arts were also very unusual. Even if a normal person's reaction was fast enough, they would not be able to catch their breath. Furthermore, when his 5 fingers had touched Li Qingshan's neck, it felt as if he had pierced the tough hide of an ox instead of a soft vital point. Li Qingshan naturally could not say that he had been taught by an ox, or else he would be treated as an idiot. He could only say that he had met an expert a few years ago. Seeing that he had a simple and honest personality, the expert had taught him a few moves, but had instructed him not to reveal his identity. A few years ago? Huang Binggu was flabbergasted. He was not too surprised that Li Qingshan was not willing to reveal his master. However, he had originally thought that Li Qingshan had practiced martial arts since he was young. If he wanted him to stay in Drawn Rain's village, the most important thing was to ask him about his master. "What's wrong?" Li Qingshan did not understand. "Haven't you been practicing martial arts since you were young? In just a few years, he was able to teach you to such an extent. It is truly inconceivable. It seems like that expert is truly an expert." Li Qingshan sweated in his heart. Luckily, he had casually said it was a few years ago and not a month ago. Otherwise, Huang Binggu would definitely be scared to death. At the same time, he also understood that mystical abilities and mortal martial arts were on 2 completely different levels. He was currently not Huang Binggu's match because he had practiced for less than 2 months, while Huang Binggu had spent 20 to 30 years of hard work. "May I know why the hunting chief has come this time? Brat, do you have any intentions of settling down in Drawn Rain's village?" Although it was a question, it had a tone that could not be refused. "All right." Li Qingshan readily agreed, but it was Huang Binggu who was stunned. "You don't have any nostalgia for your hometown? If I don't agree, would the hunting chief let me leave safely?" Li Qingshan said calmly. "Furthermore, I once heard a saying." "What saying?" "Wherever I go is my hometown. Whether it's Crouching Ox Village or Drawn Rain's village, they're no different from me. Perhaps I can learn some archery here. Do you understand, hunting chief? My ambitions do not lie in these mountains and forests. With your mediocre martial arts, making a living in the Jianghu is just a path to death. Otherwise, you'll just be a small fry that serves as a stepping stone for the disciples of large sects and clans. How can it compare to the freedom in the mountains and forests? Is hunting chief's skill not enough?" Li Qingshan was rather surprised. Huang Binggu's reputation in the surrounding villages could be described as illustrious. "I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. My archery is passable, and I've made a name for myself in the past. However, there are countless masters in the Jianghu. You've been practicing martial arts for several decades, but a child in his teens killed you like a dog. I suffered greatly. It's already fortunate that I managed to return alive." Chapter 24. Huang Binggu felt that he had not shocked Tung Qingshan enough, so he continued, "Your blade techniques and fist techniques are wide and open, so you should be walking on the path of external martial arts. This type of martial arts can be learned quickly, but if you don't have the assistance of a superior internal martial art, from the outside to the inside, reaching the realm of both internal and external cultivation, it will be difficult for you to become a first-rate master, let alone an innate master. First-rate master? Then what kind of class am I? And what is an innate master? Li Qingshan's string of questions made Huang Binggu somewhat believe in the words of an expert. If he had a proper master, how could he not know these things? Qingshan, your skills are not third-rate. That's why I don't qualify. You were able to defeat those ginseng foragers, so you can already be considered an expert. You are still young, so don't be too discouraged. As long as you train hard and become a third-rate master, you will be able to do as you please. With your talent, Qingshan, this will definitely not be a problem. Huang Binggu was afraid that the blow was too severe and would dampen Tung Qingshan's spirit, so he comforted him out of goodwill. However, who would have thought that the goal that Oxen had given to Li Qingshan was to do as he pleased, and the so-called internal martial art was even more of a joke. An innate master is even more mysterious. First, you must open up all the meridians in your body, break through the threshold of life and death, and transform your inner energy into true qi. Then, you can circulate it freely in your body without any obstructions. Once your true qi reaches a certain level, you can even release it outside your body to injure others. Wait, it seems like the qi in my body can circulate freely now, but I can't release it outside my body. It must be because the amount is too small. Li Qingshan suddenly understood that from the beginning, he stood on a different starting line than ordinary people. The path he walked on was unimaginable to ordinary martial artists. Hunting chief, I will definitely become an innate master. Huang Binggu praised him, good ambition, but his expression was non-committal. An innate master? When he first heard about these things, didn't he also have this kind of ambition? But how could it be so easy? It was as if he saw himself from back then. If you really become an innate master, I will let you be the hunting chief. This was not a casual promise. In his mind, even if Li Qingshan could become a Xianxia master, it would be decades later. Who would have thought that the person in front of him was already a so-called Xianxia master? Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. Hunting chief, you don't seem to be in good health. I was born weak. The doctor said that I wouldn't survive, but my mother didn't believe him and brought me up. I don't believe that I can't be compared to the other children in the village. I've practiced martial arts, but my foundation is still weak. I've been hurt all these years, and I'm afraid I don't have much longer to live. Li Qingshan really admired the man in front of him. Even though he didn't have any great magical powers, his willpower was enough to be his role model. Hunting chief, don't worry. As long as we find the spirit ginseng, we will definitely be able to cure you. And, although it's an ethereal object, it's still a slim chance of survival. Taking advantage of the fact that the Ginseng King Manor has suffered heavy losses, we're going to start searching the mountain today. Do you want to come along? My injuries haven't healed yet, so I'm afraid I won't be able to help you. Of course, Li Qingshan wouldn't agree. The other party was just saying it casually. There was no way he would really believe him. All right, then we'll spar again when your injuries have healed. I'll arrange for someone to teach you archery. Huang Binggu patted his shoulder. After Huang Binggu left, Li Qingshan immediately asked Oxen about it. Oxen said disdainfully, "What first-rate or second-rate? Do ants have to differentiate between strong and weak? If you can get that spirit ginseng, it'll be of great help to your cultivation." Li Qingshan could only stare at it anxiously. I'm very happy that you can learn to hunt and no longer have to rely on me. You can finally rest. From now on, you'd better take care of yourself. As expected, Oxen stuck to its usual plan of not lending a helping hand. Li Qingshan also didn't really plan on relying on it. As for snatching food from the tiger's mouth between two villages, he had even less confidence. He would most likely be throwing his life away for nothing. He could only sigh a few times and give up on this idea. He chewed on another ginseng and meditated until late at night. Just now, he was going to sleep. A wisp of green smoke rose from the locust wood tablet and transformed into a handsome child. He glanced at Li Qingshan and, as if he'd made up his mind, flew into the mountain with the night wind. His bloodless lips opened and closed. If someone who was proficient in lip reading saw it, they would know that the word he was muttering was spirit ginseng. Oxen opened its eyes and glanced at him, then closed them again and went back to sleep. Little and flew out of Drawn Rain's village and into the undulating mountain range. He freely passed through the dense forest, but he still had to avoid the fierce mountain wind from time to time. He saw a bit of fire in the distance. When he flew closer, he saw that it was the hunters of Drawn Rain's village resting by a bonfire with their weapons. Huang Binggu was discussing tactics with a few hunters in a low voice. Little and circled around a few times and listened for a while. Then he rode the wind and flew up Bai Lao Peak. He carefully examined every stream and every rock. Of course, he would occasionally be attracted by small animals passing by and forget his original goal. However, he would always quickly regain his senses and continue his search. There was only one thought in his mind: I must find the spirit ginseng. Only then can I help him. At the fourth watch, the ginseng foragers launched a night attack, but they were repelled by the prepared Huang Binggu. However, neither side found the spirit ginseng. Little and was the same. He returned to the village before the sun rose. His face was full of exhaustion and he was almost tired of it. It was not easy for a child's mind to last. Furthermore, this job was too lonely for him. He had already tasted the feeling of loneliness. However, when he looked at Li Qingshan's face that was still fast asleep, a new motivation suddenly surged in his heart. He clenched his fists and dove into the locust tree wooden tablet to sleep. Early in the morning, an old hunter with a stern expression woke Li Qingshan up. "Chief Hunter, let me teach you archery." Li Qingshan noticed that the old hunter's left leg was slightly lame. However, in order not to be rude, he only glanced at it. He did not expect the old hunter to have already noticed it. He calmly said, "You were bitten by a wolf. Follow me." A group of teenagers were already waiting in an empty space on the west side of the village. The older ones were about the same age as Li Qingshan, while the younger ones still had snot dripping from their noses. However, all of them carried a hunting bow on their backs. Their gazes towards Li Qingshan were filled with wariness and hostility. "Grandpa Zong, is he coming with us as well?" Grandpa Zong nodded slightly and did not explain further. He directly said, "Draw the bow." The group of teenagers immediately stopped talking. They drew their hunting bows and aimed at the target in the distance. Grandpa Zong corrected their postures one by one and explained the essentials of archery, leaving Li Qingshan to the side. Li Qingshan did not feel bored and listened attentively to the side. After an hour, Grandpa Zong ordered the others to rest and finally said to Li Qingshan, "Train your strength first." He pointed to the stone dumbbells at the side. Li Qingshan went to grab the stone dumbbells. Compared to teachers like Oxen who did not care about your life, this level of cold treatment was still acceptable. Grandpa Zong revealed a slightly surprised expression. He did not like Li Qingshan, but he could not disobey Huang Binggu's orders. Therefore, he had purposely given him the cold treatment to train his temperament. He did not expect him to not be angry at all, which was completely different from what he had expected. He thought to himself, "No wonder the chief hunter thinks so highly of him." "Brat, where did you come from?" The teenagers could not help but approach him. Their faces were filled with provocation. Crouching Ox Village. You're just a farmer, yet you have the strength of an ox. I heard you even brought an ox with you. We don't need oxen here, so let's kill it and eat its meat. Li Qingshan could not stoop to their level and shout about killing him, but he would not allow them to insult him as they pleased either. His arms suddenly exerted force and he threw the 2 stone dumbbells that weighed several dozen kilograms high into the air. Holy shit! The teenagers scattered in all directions in fear. If the stone dumbbells that weighed several dozen kilograms fell down, they would definitely have their brains smashed to pieces. The stone dumbbells fell heavily. Li Qingshan did not dodge at all. Instead, he focused all of his attention and grasped the timing. He grabbed the stone dumbbells and twisted his body to nullify the force of the impact. He looked at them with a smile. The group of youngsters were dumbstruck, and they made a series of swallowing sounds. How much strength was needed to lift those 2 stone dumbbells? Most of them could do it, but throwing them so high up in the air was impossible, let alone catching them again. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.